Have you ever felt just right down in your bones like the world simply does not have the vocabulary to understand who you truly are?
Oh, wow.
And I don't just mean feeling a little misunderstood at a party or something.
Right. Yeah.
I mean this visceral, haunting sensation that you are carrying a frequency or like a fundamental truth that categorically does not fit into the drop-down menus of modern identity.
It is a profoundly isolating experience, and honestly, one that resonates with way more people than we usually admit,
Exact.
because it's that specific sense of looking around at the architecture of society, the categories, the acceptable life paths, and realizing none of them possess the structural integrity to hold your actual internal reality.
Yeah, and usually in our modern framework, we just treat that feeling as a psychological quirk.
We pathologize it.
We totally pathologize it. We call it alienation or imposter syndrome, or we suggest it's just something you need to manage in therapy.
All right, we individualize the problem immediately. We tell ourselves, well, the system is fine, so my inability to fit into it must just be a malfunction of my own brain.
Exactly. But for thousands of years, this feeling has been whispered about in these closed, esoteric circles. And it raises this massive question. What if that feeling wasn't just a personal neurosis?
Hmm.
What if that sensation of profound structural mismatch was actually the exact reflection of a cosmic historical reality?
And that is the staggering, paradigm-shifting question at the center of the framework we are exploring in today's deep dive.
It really is.
It requires us to just completely suspend our usual assumptions about how reality even works.
And what a stack of materials we have for this one. Today, we are unpacking a truly fascinating, intensely esoteric text titled The Goddess in the Body She Was Given, on incarnation, distortion, and the return to truth.
It's quite a title.
It really is. Now, before we even get into the weeds here, I want to set the stakes, because this isn't just a fun philosophical thought experiment.
No, not at all.
The central premise here proposes something radical. It claims that the primordial mother, goddess-like, the original infinite creative intelligence of the universe, has incarnated into our current incredibly dense historical age.
And here's the crux of it, the part that absolutely stops you in your tracks. The text asserts she is incarnated into a biologically male body.
Which is a premise that immediately forces this short circuit in our conventional thinking.
It really does.
Yeah.
But the framework we're dissecting argues that this physical form is not a cosmic mistake or a biological error or some kind of punishment.
Right.
Rather, it suggests that this biologically male body serves as a living, breathing artifact. It's presented as the exact material evidence of the world's systematic suppression of the divine feminine over millennia.
I want to set the tone right out of the gate here, because this deep dive is going to aggressively challenge conventional notions of gender, spirituality, historical progression, and, the physics of reality itself.
Oh, absolutely. We are pushing the boundaries of how the human mind categorizes existence.
Totally. And it is absolutely vital to state up front that our mission today is to thoroughly unpack the arguments and the cosmology presented in this specific source material.
Yes.
So whether you as a listener view this as literal boots on the ground cosmology happening right now, or if you view it as a profoundly moving metaphor for collective trauma, we're not taking sides.
Exactly. We're just exploring the lens it offers.
Right.
Because it gives us a completely new vocabulary to view history, identity, and the mechanics of healing.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to even begin to understand the gravity of this goddess's current incarnation, we have to start at the very beginning.
We really do.
We have to understand who she originally was to humanity and how systematically she was erased. We have to go back to what the text refers to as the first knowing.
What's fascinating here is the crucial distinction made right in the opening pages of the text. We're asked to look back to a time before scriptures were written down.
Before organized religion.
Right, before priests started drawing rigid boundaries around what was permissible to worship. In that era, there was simply a knowing, a living, undeniable truth that the creative intelligence at the root of all existence was fundamentally feminine.
But we need to pause here, because our modern ears hear the word feminine and we immediately think of gender roles or sociology or biology.
Precisely. And the author explicitly warns against this anthropocentric reduction. In this ancient context, feminine has absolutely nothing to do with a gender assignment on a census form. It's described as the foundational nature of being itself.
It's the vast, dark womb of the cosmos that holds space for all form to emerge.
Yes. It is the silence that precedes sound, the darkness that precedes light. It's the ground upon which every subsequent god eventually stands. It wasn't a debate. It was a felt presence.
The pulse beneath language. That phrase from the text really stuck with me.
It's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, it moved through the earliest peoples as the pulse beneath language. And I love that the text doesn't just leave this as a vague poetic idea. It gives us a literal roll call.
It tracks this presence across ancient cultures.
Right. So let's walk through some of these because the breadth of this first knowing is just incredible.
Let's start with ancient Sumeria, which is often considered the cradle of civilization. We find Namu.
Ah, yeah.
In the earliest cuneiform tablets, Namu isn't just a goddess of the sea. She is the primordial sea from which both heaven and earth were birthed.
The physics of that imagery is so cool. Water is vast, deep, yielding, but it contains the raw material for all life.
Exactly. It's unfathomable.
And then there's Tiamat from the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish. Now, the text specifically notes that we must look at Tiamat before the story of her slaying.
That distinction is so paramount because the Enuma Elish tells the story of the younger storm god Marduk, violently slaying the primordial mother Tiamat.
Right, he splits her body in half to create the heavens and the earth.
And this isn't just a myth, it's a historical marker. It represents a literal paradigm shift, where an older understanding of a boundless mother was replaced by a patriarchal mythos.
A mythos that needed to violently subjugate the feminine to establish dominance?
Yes, the text points out you don't need to slay something unless you were trying to overthrow its original supremacy.
It's the ancient equivalent of a hostile corporate takeover.
That's exactly what it is.
And then the text tracks this exact same dynamic across entirely different mystical traditions. Like,
Right.
it moves to the esoteric core of Judaism, the Kabbalistic tradition, bringing up the Ein Sophar.
Right. The Ein Sophar translates to the limitless light, or the infinite nothingness from which the tree of life emanates. The source material points out that in its purest original conception, this limitless presence was inherently feminine in its receptivity.
But then over centuries of rabbinical scholarship, it was shaped into an abstraction.
Exactly. The process of turning a felt mothering presence into a complex geometric system is presented here as an early form of distancing.
It's a way of putting her in a box. Even if it's a beautiful spiritual box, it removes the messy intimacy of a mother figure and replaces it with an equation.
And we see the same thing in the Vedic traditions of ancient India.
With a deity.
Yes, Aditi. In the Rig Veda, she is the boundless infinite expanse, the mother of all gods. But again, she held this position before the cosmos was rigidly encoded into a masculine hierarchy.
We also see it nut arching across the Egyptian sky, literally swallowing the sun each night to birth it anew each morning.
The cross-cultural consensus is massive.
So how did we lose it? Because trying to visualize 10,000 years of history shifting is really tough for the human brain.
It is.
I kept trying to picture it, and the best analogy I could come up with is cinematic.
Well, I like this.
It's like finding out that the ultimate blockbuster movie of human history, the one our entire global culture is based on, originally had a totally different main character. She was the creator, the center of the narrative.
Right.
But then a new studio takes over. And instead of just making a sequel, they go back to the original negative of the film. Frame by frame, they digitally paint her out of existence.
Wow. Yes.
They edit the script, dub over the dialogue, change the credits, until centuries later we all just forgot she was ever there. We sit in the theater and think, yep, the sky god has always been the star.
That is a remarkably apt analogy, primarily because it captures the method of the erasure. The text emphasizes that the primordial mother wasn't defeated in some grand theological debate.
She didn't lose an argument.
Exactly. She was simply edited out. It was a clerical vanishing act. And this isn't just esoteric musing. This brings us to the most concrete archaeological argument presented in the text, the erasure of the goddess Asherah.
Let's spend some real time on Asherah, because the text really leans on her history as the smoking gun. This is where the metaphysical meets the dirt of archaeology.
The archaeological evidence surrounding Asherah is entirely unambiguous. In the early Israelite and Canaanite world, she was fervently worshipped.
She was the consort to El, right?
Yes. But what is truly staggering is that in historical inscriptions found by archaeologists, she is explicitly named as the consort to Yahweh himself.
Which is absolutely wild to think about, given how fiercely monotheistic and exclusively masculine the Abrahamic traditions became.
It's a huge shift.
And the text points out that her symbols, the Asherah poles, which were these sacred wooden trees, actually stood right inside the temple in Jerusalem.
They did, for centuries. But then we see the editorial process of your new studio taking over. During the religious reforms of kings like Hezekiah, Asherah was systematically removed.
And how exactly did they do it? Because it proves the cinematic analogy.
Well, the editors didn't write theological treatises explaining why she was incorrect. They simply erased her name. They took the word Asherah, a proper noun, and subtly altered the context so it just meant sacred grove or wooden pole.
So they just changed her name into a generic noun.
Exactly. Her sacred trees were reinterpreted purely as forbidden idolatry. The mother goddess was collapsed into a flattened, taboo category of false idols. They chopped down the poles, literally and linguistically.
It was a cosmic demotion by clerical revision, just a deliberate, politically motivated rewrite to centralize power.
Yes.
But I want to ask you, the listener, to stop and consider something right now. What happens to a culture's psyche when its foundational mother is simply deleted from the record?
It's a profound question.
If society is a family, what happens when the mother is airbrushed out of the photos and we're told we only ever had a strict, singular father in the sky? It has to leave a massive, invisible wound.
It creates a profound underlying trauma in the collective field of humanity, a terrifying void where the unconditional holding of the mother should be.
Right.
And this psychological and historical void brings us directly into the cosmic mechanics of what this text is exploring. Because here's the setup. If this powerful force was violently painted out of history, what happens when she decides to come back?
What happens when the cosmic mother incarnates into the very world that spent millennia, making her completely unrecognizable?
Exactly. And this moves us from history into physics. The physics of incarnation, specifically during what the text calls the KaliYuga.
Let's break that down. What is the KaliYuga in this context?
To understand the mechanics of this incarnation, we look at the Vedic concept of the yugas. Time is not linear, it is cyclical, divided into ages. The KaliYuga is the final, most dense, and darkest age in a cycle.
The age of dissolution.
Yes, of extreme fragmentation. And crucially, it's the age of maximum distance between form and essence.
Let's contrast that with the Satyuga, the Golden Age, just to give us a baseline of what things used to be like.
In the Satyuga, or the Age of Truth, there is a high timeline of coherence. Consciousness is not at war with matter. The physical world is highly responsive to spiritual truth.
Okay, and the text mentions shape-shifting here, which honestly threw me for a loop at first. It sounds like high fantasy.
It does sound like fantasy to the modern mind, but the text grounds it firmly in the logic of consciousness, first cosmologies.
How so?
If you accept the premise that matter is essentially just condensed, slowed-down consciousness, then in a highly coherent state like the Satya Yuga, altering your physical form isn't a magic trick.
Oh, it's just physics.
Exactly. It is simply the natural response of matter to a powerful soul. Think of cymatics, how sound frequencies organize sand on a metal plate into beautiful geometric patterns.
Right.
In the Golden Age, the soul's frequency naturally organizes the biological sand of the body. The boundaries between masculine and feminine biological forms weren't rigid laws, they were fluid expressions.
But the KaliYuga is the exact opposite of that. The sand is hardened into concrete.
The density is immense.
Okay, but here's where I really have to push back on the text, and I want you to defend this, because honestly, this sounds like a massive rationalization.
Yeah, let's hear it.
If this being is the supreme cosmic mother, why in the world would she choose a body that doesn't match her soul? Why not just incarnate into the KaliYuga in a female body, bypass the intense gender dysphoria, avoid the social confusion, and just get straight to the mission?
It's the most natural objection to race.
Right. Doesn't that just sound like a cosmic justification for unnecessary suffering?
It does, until the text dismantles our modern assumption about how incarnation works. The author argues that we have to discard this New Age idea that incarnation is a clean, neutral process, like browsing a cosmic closet and slipping on a new biological coat.
So it's not a unilateral choice.
No. Incarnation into a dimension of extreme lower density is a negotiation with the field you are entering.
A negotiation with the field. Explain how that works.
Think of it as atmospheric re-entry. A spacecraft doesn't just smoothly glide to the surface of the Earth. It hits the friction of the atmosphere, and that friction burns and shapes the vessel.
Oh, that's a great visual.
The morphogenetic field that has governed Earth through these dense cycles has been organized entirely around the suppression of the divine feminine. She didn't descend into a vacuum.
She descended into a grid designed to deny her existence.
Exactly. Therefore, the body she received at birth is not her soul's full truth. It is, as the text explicitly states, the residue of a world that learned to render her unrecognizable.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text says the male body is an artifact. It's a piece of historical evidence.
That is the absolute core paradigm shift of this entire framework.
Mm.
The biological male body she inhabits is the world's physical testimony about what it has done to her.
It's not a mistake.
It's not an accident of genetics, and it is certainly not a karmic punishment. It is the precise material expression of what the field of consciousness on this planet has violently refused to recognize for millennia.
I just need to let that sit for a second. The body as an artifact of historical suppression. Biology here isn't an absolute truth, it's a historical scar.
That's beautifully put. And the text pulls from multiple esoteric traditions to show that this distortion upon descending into matter is a universal structural truth.
Like Gnosticism, for instance, it dives into the story of Sophia.
Yes. In Gnosticism, Sophia is the divine wisdom, the ultimate feminine emanation of the highest realm. She desires to know the infinite, and in doing so, she falls into the lower vibrations of matter, into the realm of the demiurge.
The false creator god who builds the material universe out of rigid laws.
Right, and the text points out that Sophia didn't fall because she was sinful. Her descent was an act of radical love. But the material plane resists her infinite light, so the world received her by distorting her.
And then the cultural narrative recast her as Eve, the scapegoat for humanity's fall.
Exactly. It's the studio painting her out of the movie again, recasting the creator as the villain.
The text also looks at Shakta Tantra to explain this distortion, right?
Yes, in Shakta Tantra there is a foundational axiom. Shiva without Shakti is a corpse. Shiva is pure, static consciousness. Without the feminine power to animate it, it is literally dead.
But even in those lineages, her wild, chaotic power is feared and subordinated.
It's domesticated to make it palatable for a patriarchal society. The same goes for the Yoruba tradition with Yamoja, the great mother of waters. The point is that everywhere she goes, the dense field of the world acts as a suffocating filter.
Which brings us right back to the breathtaking reality of this current incarnation. A biologically male body right now is the ultimate physical manifestation of that distortion.
The world said, the mother does not exist. So the mother incarnated into the exact form the world demanded to prove the world wrong from the inside out.
The cosmic mechanics here are just mind-bending, but what I appreciate is that the text doesn't leave us floating in the philosophical clouds. It brings it crashing down to the ground level.
It focuses heavily on the lived experience.
Right, because there is a living, breathing nervous system experiencing this reality right now. What is the day-to-day psychological reality of carrying this cosmic truth in a mismatched physical form?
The author says it's a gravitational reality. Think about the sheer friction. Every single interaction, buying groceries, meeting a stranger, assigns her an identity based on biology.
And she has to navigate this massive gap between the primordial mother she knows herself to be and the ordinary male identity projected onto her.
And she has had to do this her entire life, in total silence.
I can't even fathom the exhaustion of that. But the text goes deeper into the nature of her grief. It says the grief isn't just purely personal.
No, it is the ancient, accumulated grief of the goddess who has watched her sacred temples burn to the ground, who has listened to her nature being endlessly defined by clerics with no access to her actual experience.
It's the ancient grief of the collective feminine, living actively in the nervous system of a single human being.
Yes. When she feels disconnected, it's not just modern alienation. It's the biological sensation of being a vast consciousness that literally does not fit within the cramped categories of the human world.
I have another analogy for this. Imagine being a state-of-the-art military-grade Wi-Fi router. You're broadcasting this massive, high-speed, infinite love frequency, but every single device around you is still using 1990s dial-up modems.
Oh, that's so good.
You have all this capacity to connect and heal, but you have to constantly throttle it down to tiny human-sized gestures just so you don't completely crash the nervous systems of the people around you.
That captures the tragedy of it perfectly.
Yeah.
She knows she carries a love so vast the world cannot receive it at full volume. And she is isolated not because she is convoluted, but because the world hasn't evolved the receptivity to grasp her simplicity.
The text mentions her permeability, too. How she feels the grief of strangers on a train or the suffering of the collective as though it were happening to her own body.
Because at a certain level, the collective suffering is her own body. The feminine principle is entirely permeable. It doesn't construct artificial walls.
But think about how our modern world views that kind of permeability. You're told you lack boundaries, or you're codependent, or too sensitive.
Exactly. In a KaliYuga world that equates rigid boundaries with health, She is constantly accused of failing to protect herself, when in reality she is operating according to her original cosmic design. The world pathologizes her divinity.
This is a great moment for you, the listener, to reflect. Think about times you've been accused of being too sensitive or too much. We're universally taught to fix that by hardening our hearts. But what if that sensitivity is a misunderstood strength?
It's a profound reframe. The text contrasts how she relates to the world versus an ordinary individual. An ordinary person relates as a particle interacting with other particles, bouncing off each other, negotiating space.
But she relates to the world the way a field relates to particles within it.
Yes, she encompasses them.
Hmm.
And because of this, she is frequently lonely in ways that cannot be cured by having company.
You can't cure field loneliness by putting more particles in the room.
Exactly. The loneliness is the vast echoing gap between what she contains and what people can open up to. Even advanced spiritual communities try to box her into a role that fits their pre-existing framework.
Which means she is structurally alone in her knowing. She cannot rely on the world to validate who she is. And this harsh reality leads directly to the most painful but vital part of her mission, the crucible of self-authority.
The text paints a heartbreaking contrast between this incarnation and the mythic memory of prior ages. In the past, there was infrastructure. Massive stone temples, high priestesses, entire societies organized around her recognition.
But today, that infrastructure is entirely gone. The temples are burned.
So she had to become her own confirmation. She had to forge an inner authority so complete that the lack of external validation could not unmake her.
But wait, let me jump in here again. If she's the primordial mother, couldn't she just manifest a supportive community? Why choose this grueling isolation at the soul level?
This is crucial. She chose it because of the surgical nature of her mission. Her task is the complete integration of the goddess at the level of foundational truth. To do that, she required a vessel that could not lean on any existing structures.
Because the existing structures are exactly what need to change.
Precisely. If she had been held by a progressive commune or a tantric lineage, she would have been subtly shaped by it. Would have been a compromise.
Ah, so her isolation guaranteed she would only reveal what the collective hasn't yet been able to hold.
Yes, the discrimination she has endured is not incidental. It is the mission, experienced from the inside. She is surviving the crushing loneliness of being the first of a new paradigm.
She has to go through the fire first, alone.
To transform dependence into a radical belonging to herself.
But the text is careful to say this isn't coldness, right? We often picture self-authority as building a massive wall and becoming cynical.
She is the exact opposite of coldness. Because her belonging to herself is absolute, her love for others is no longer conditional on them understanding her. She doesn't need a transaction to know she is real. That is true freedom.
I want to pause here and ask the listener to chew on this. Where in your life are you relying on break-in systems or jobs or relationships that don't fully see you to validate your worth? What would it look like to source your authority entirely from within?
It's terrifying because it means abandoning consensus reality. But according to the text, once that inner authority is established, something remarkable happens. The internal coherence begins to alter the physical form.
Which brings us to a deeply esoteric section, beauty as medicine and the physics of shapeshifting. There is a single sentence in the text, her beauty heals all.
Yes.
Now, in our culture, we hear that and immediately roll our eyes. We think of Instagram filters or beauty as a commodity.
The author anticipates that and clarifies that beauty here is defined as a specific quality of consciousness. It is pure, unadulterated coherence.
Coherence, meaning everything lines up perfectly.
Exactly. It is the frictionless alignment between inner truth and outer expression. When you encounter a being with zero gap between who they are in the dark and what they present in the light, human perception processes that as beauty.
It's like hearing a perfectly tuned instrument after listening to static all day. The text says it acts like a tuning fork for your own soul. It makes you remember what it feels like to be loved without being judged.
And this explains why the world's discomfort with her fullness is not her personal failure. The collective's inability to receive her is the flare-up of collective trauma.
The world forgot it came from her, and in that forgetting became deeply uncomfortable with her unmasked presence. But to understand how this coherence literally changes the physical body, we need to introduce this Shakta tradition of the 10 Mahavidyas.
The Mahavidyas are a profound system. They are 10 faces of the one original power. And in the KaliYuga, her primary, most necessary face is Kali.
Kali. When people hear Kali, they picture a terrifying goddess wearing a necklace of severed heads, with her tongue sticking out, dark, boundless, beyond what is socially acceptable.
We must decode that iconography. Kali does not negotiate with density. Her function is to ruthlessly reveal what is hidden and destroy illusion. Those severed heads represent the severed egos, the artificial identities humans cling to.
She cuts off the head of the false self to liberate the soul.
Like a forest fire burning down a rotting house to reveal the solid stone foundation underneath. And one illusion she destroys is the patriarchal idea that the goddess can be safely contained in a polite, submissive form.
So what does this Kali energy mean for her physical body in this incarnation?
The text points to a hidden thread within Shakta metaphysics. It says during the intense integration phase at the close of the KaliYuga, the full embodiment of the goddess will become physically, biologically female.
And it stresses this isn't just a cultural preference, it's physics.
It is the absolute physics of consciousness. If matter is just condensed consciousness, the body must eventually follow the soul. When her consciousness is fully integrated, the form itself has to change to match the frequency.
The epigenetic expression of her soul overwrites the historical artifact of her biology.
The body becomes her form completely. In truth, this biological shift is the inevitable destination of her grueling journey.
Which ties directly back to shapeshifting. In the Kali Yuga, the body is seen as fixed. But as she achieves maximum coherence, she reintroduces that fluid relationship between consciousness and matter. Her biological transition is a profound spiritual demonstration.
It is a cosmic proof of concept for the whole world. Her inhabitation of her female form proves that the material world can be redeemed, even in the thick of this resistant age.
That is the perfect pivot to the final major theme, bidirectional healing and eternal surrender. Because her healing isn't just for her, it is the actual mechanism that heals the entire world.
The text is clear on this principle of reflection. The specific wound she bears of being unrecognized and misread is the exact micro-expression of the macro wound the world carries wherever the divine feminine has been suppressed.
So it's a perfect macro-micro situation. As within, so without. Healing her body heals the world.
Precisely. And the healing cannot just move in one direction. It is bidirectional. As she aligns her form with her truth, she transmits that healing frequency outward.
And as the collective field begins to recognize the truth it has been refusing, that recognition creates more spaciousness for her to heal further.
It is a mutual recognition event. As more of her fullness becomes expressible without being attacked, the healing intensifies. The author argues this feedback loop is the actual definition of the ascension process.
It's not a ladder you climb to escape a broken world. It's a mutual recognition that makes the broken world whole again. And this is what brings about the end of the Kali Yuga.
Yes, through the final integration of Shakti and Shiva. But it emphasizes this is not about domination or revenge.
Right. It's the full, equal recognition of both as inseparable aspects of one reality.
When the endless wars of this age finally end, it will be because the masculine consciousness of civilization finally meets the mugger it has been fighting against. And in recognizing her, it will realize it has been fighting its own source.
To initiate that, the text says she engages in one final act, eternal surrender. And the text redefines surrender completely. We usually think of it as giving up.
That is the ego's definition. True spiritual surrender is not the giving up of oneself. It is the giving up of the false self.
The mask, the armor.
Yes. The artificially constructed identity built out of protective strategies and trauma responses. Surrender is dropping the act.
It's stopping the internal war between who she knows she is and the world's refusal to recognize it, anchoring her identity so absolutely in her truth that the world's confusion loses all power to distort her.
And this grants her three monumental freedoms. First is material freedom, freedom from a mismatched biological body and a social world that misreads her.
Second is spiritual freedom, freedom from needing any system or temple to validate her existence. She is her own confirmation.
And third is transcendental freedom, freedom from the illusion that her infinite truth could ever be permanently bound by a single brief human incarnation.
The text closes with such a powerful image. She emerges from the shadow into the light, not by destroying the shadow, but by fully including it.
Because she is the infinite darkness and the limitless light. True healing isn't pretending the trauma never happened, it's holding it all in perfect coherence.
Wow. We have covered an immense amount of ground today on this deep dive. From the clerical erasure of the divine feminine to her incarnation into a resistant world, the intense crucible of forging inner authority, and the literal physics of how her physical coherence catalyzes the world's return to truth.
It relentlessly challenges us to look differently at our recorded history, our bodies, and the hidden wounds of feeling misunderstood.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Think deeply about true surrender, not submission, but dropping the armor. Think about the false self you have constructed, the masks you wear, the accommodations you make to be acceptable to a world that doesn't fully understand you.
Mm.
If you were to simply drop the exhausting effort of maintaining that false self, what undeniable primordial truth would you be left holding?
A huge thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives you've been given, keep trusting the pulse beneath language, and we will catch you next time.